my body feels like an encyclopedia of terms and conditions that were accepted on my behalf that I've now needed to learn what they mean. I acquired these, I didn't create them. It feels like my body sort of adopted me and I'm learning it, as opposed to feeling like we're together. And my earliest memories are of not understanding myself or feeling in control of my body, like I had no autonomy over it, and like I'm incomplete and needed other people to satisfy my body or to fix my body for me, alongside me. And all of that is really bad stuff that led to a lot of bad things, and we're working through them. What's going on, guys? My name is Ari. If you are new here, welcome to the channel. This series is called Ari's Overshares. It's the series in which I overshare on all matters of the heart, matters of my mind, and matters of my life. I overshare on a lot of things because it makes me feel connected, and quite frankly, being vulnerable is, I think, a lot easier for me to do than most people on average. This video is about to be the most raw, most vulnerable, most intimate, emotionally intense, and challenging video that I have ever attempted to record in my life. A couple of weeks ago, I recorded a confessional video about my disordered eating journey and things that I struggle with, specifically that I struggled with over the Thanksgiving holiday, where I got triggered and I ended up overeating, which is something that I struggle with. The response to that video was massive. I got a lot of support and encouragement, and I heard from a lot of people who struggle similarly to food and body dysmorphia and disordered eating as I do, and it was the fuel for me to feel like I could safely record this video in the hopes that it reaches somebody out there who is struggling and who maybe feels really uniquely alone in their experience with these very difficult and challenging things to work through and to be managing, that you're not alone, that the things that we go through that sometimes feel so unique and rare to us and so uncomfortable, but I just want to echo that you're not alone. I want to, over time, talk about my entire journey with my body image issues, my body dysmorphia, my disordered eating habits, food as a coping mechanism, the way that I struggle around food and being emotionally dysregulated, all of that. But in order to effectively talk about that journey, we need to start from the beginning. We need to start with all of the things that I believe from a very early age in my life have influenced the person who I've become today, in terms of the things that I struggle with today in this present moment, the moment in which I would talk to you about what my current struggles are and symptoms are. And so we are starting quite literally from day one, or 3 years old in my instance. This video today, part 1 of this series, this mini series on the body and my disordered eating struggle, is going to be really like an anthology of trauma, a recounting of things that I've experienced both within my body and that have happened to my body that I know have contributed, influenced, impact, caused the struggles that I have, that I think a lot of us have. And I think also a lot of that story is unfortunately or fortunately shared. I don't think I'm alone in a lot of the things that I'm going to share here in this video today that I've experienced that have caused a lot of these issues with my body dysmorphia and my struggles with food, but we need to really start there. And so today is not going to be a prescriptive on navigating through food triggers. It's not going to be any positive conversation about how I have worked through these things, which I have. Beautiful spoiler or disclaimer, I have worked through a lot of them and it's gotten a lot better. But part 1 today is just going to be an anthology of my beginnings in this body and the things that I've experienced that have caused a lot of the issues that I presented in that video, Confessions of a Disordered Eater. So without further ado, let's get in. So we're doing this in chronological order, and I think it makes sense to start with my earliest bodily memory, the first memory that I ever remember consciously having in this vessel. And it was when I was 3 years old, and I was sitting on my parents' bed. I was watching TV with my mom, and I got this random sudden urge to throw up, which is probably pretty normal at that age, because when you're a 3-year-old, you're eating all this stuff, and just like that's a very normal thing, right? But what happened was I immediately jumped out of the bed, and I was trying to run to the bathroom. I could see the bathroom right in my direct line of sight from the bed. But because I jumped up so quickly, it startled my mom. She got really concerned that I seemed like I wasn't feeling well. And she jumped up and essentially like kind of blocked me as I was trying to get to the bathroom. She's like, "What's going on? Where are you going? Is everything okay?" Like, she starts to panic. And in my head, I know that I just need to throw up and that I'm getting really nauseous, but I don't want to say that because I feel like I'm just like, if I open my mouth, it's going to come out. And I'm trying desperately to get to the bathroom. Long story short, she won't let me pass her until I explain to her what's going on. And by the time that she did all of that, I couldn't hold it back any longer. And I threw up all over the bed. Sorry, TMI, but you know what? Honestly, this whole video is going to be pretty disgusting. Now, the reason I'm sharing this story specifically is not necessarily because I think this is how it all started, but I do think it is a tragically beautiful foreshadower to things that I experienced later in my life that echoed a similar string of thought, which is the fact that I did not have control over my body. In this particular instance, I knew exactly what I needed to do to serve myself, and I was forced to pass through another person in order to accomplish that, to get their permission, to get their understanding so that I could get where I needed to go. And that's something that I've unfortunately experienced many, many times, countless times over the course of my life. The next incident, or sort of series of my life that I remember, happened around ages 4 to maybe 7. And it was that whenever I would throw a temper tantrum as a kid, when I would get really cranky and aggravated and high-strung and intense, you know, some kids scream or run or cry, and I definitely remember doing some of that stuff. But I also did things that most kids don't do, which I didn't realize was not normal at the time. I realized this through therapy. But when I would have really intense temper tantrums, I'd get mad at my mom. She didn't want me to do something that I wanted to do. You know, again, this is normal child stuff. I would kick myself. And I don't know how to describe it other than I would just be so emotionally overwhelmed and I would have so much energy that I didn't know what to do with, that I would literally just lay down and I'd take my right heel and I'd bang it against my left shin. And I would do that until I was in so much pain, physical pain, that I was forced to stop. And I remember for years of my early childhood like this, my legs would be covered, my lower legs, my shins on both feet would be covered in black and blues, to the point where my mom was concerned that if I wore shorts out of the house, people would think that she was hitting me, which she was not. I was directing this entirely onto myself. And I remember being in therapy last year and explaining this to my psychologist, and she stopped me and she said, "Ariana, that's self-harm." And I couldn't believe that that's what I was doing. I don't know where I learned that. I don't know how I learned that behavior. I don't know why that felt so comfortable to me. But from a very early age, again, from 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, I've got too much energy going on around me in my head. There's ambiguous pain going on up here for some reason that I don't remember now, but reflexively, what felt like the easiest and best, most accessible thing for me to do was to hit myself and to hurt myself. And that's also, unfortunately, something that I think projected or amplified as I grew older as well. My body became a place where I learned to direct my pain toward. It's not something that I learned to protect or heal or nurture from a very early age, before I feel like even now, like I could know better than to do. I don't know why, but that's what I chose. So the next stage of my life is blocks of the age from, I'd say, roughly 7 to 12 years old. So what happened? My digestive system essentially went into failure from the ages of 7 to 12 to varying levels of severity. In the earlier of that age range, right between ages 7 to 9, I would have the occasional digestive issue, you know, like the mild acid reflux, mild constipation. I would struggle to go to the bathroom, but a lot of those things were infrequent or inconsistent. They weren't happening at a rate or a frequency or an intensity that I think would have caused any alarm. Did I struggle digestively more than the average kid? I think so. But at that point, we had no reason to believe, I had no reason to believe, my parents had no reason to believe that it was anything beyond me just having a more sensitive stomach, more sensitive tummy than other kids my age, which again, could be seen as normal, right? But in the later stages of this age range, 9, 10, 11, 12, all of those symptoms that I just cited, they started to happen really frequently. Their intensity started to really ramp up, like to a serious level. Like I'm talking, if we're going to say, I had issues with gas and constipation that were mild, they got really severe. I literally wouldn't go to the bathroom for days. I would have severe nausea. My acid reflux that was maybe mild or potentially food driven became intense. I was taking Zantac with every single meal. I couldn't really hold things down properly. I never felt good. I felt sick. I felt very, very sick. And it only got worse and worse and worse as I got older, 10, 11, 12 years old. And so what would have maybe potentially early on been just me having a sensitive stomach or me, having coincidentally eaten something that didn't sit well, it started to raise a deeper concern that I potentially had a serious I'd have those too, but a serious medical condition that required evaluation. Now, here's where I'm going to apply a little bit of hindsight, because when I was 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, I didn't know then what I know now. I was a child. When you're a child, you're just going through life. You're present to your normal experience. Everything that you're experiencing is normal to you because you don't know any better. You don't know any different. But also B, in hindsight now, I can see connections that I was simply missing back then, that I would have had no reason to understand back then. And the big one is the link between your gut health and your psychological health. Now, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a gastroenterologist, I'm not a GI doctor, I'm not a gut doctor, but I do know that there is a bounty of evidence supporting the link between your digestive health, your gut health, how your things are moving in your body, in your stomach, in your small intestines, and your psychological health, your mental well-being, your clarity, your stress, your anxiety, your cortisol levels. These are things that are almost inextricably linked. And it's part of why making a video or a series like this so complicated, because you can't really clearly, effectively tease out A led to B led to C. It creates this really insidious, complicated, disastrous web. And so this is going to be a long series because there's no other way around it other than to give you everything that I know. I grew up in an extraordinarily chaotic environment. My parents were constantly fighting, not physically fighting, but verbally fighting. There was a lot of yelling in the house, a lot of daddy didn't come home. Where's daddy? Mommy and daddy aren't talking. Really confusing stuff for a little child. No one explained to me what was going on. It was a very hands-off, honestly emotionally malnourished childhood. Lots of screaming and yelling and tension and not knowing who could be a safe container for me as a child when I would come home and I needed to talk about something, and not knowing at any given moment in time if things were good in the house or bad in the house. Because again, I was a child, and that was the extent to which I could really process what was going on. It was, how does the house feel? Now, what do we know about the body? I know that a stressed body is not a healthy body. We've talked before about the concept of fight, flight, or freeze, what happens to an animal when they're in a threat detection zone or threat-based scenario, right? Your options are fight, get on the offensive, be aggressive, attack, flight, run away, or the lesser known of the three options, freeze. My body had the equivalent of a freeze reaction. My digestive system shut down basically entirely in response to all of the stress and anxiety and chaos and uncertainty that was present, omnipresent, inextricably tied to my environment and my situation in my childhood years. I was feeling so, again, not cognitively, it's not like I came home and I was like, I'm scared because I'm unsafe, but emotionally in my feeling body, this manifested in my physical body. I felt so scared and so unsafe that my body was in terror. My symptoms skyrocketed. All of those things that I cited as being mild or moderate before, the constipation, the gas, the acid reflux, the nausea, they became extraordinarily severe. My mild constipation turned into my digestive system quite literally shutting down for days on end consistently. Sorry, TMI, maybe a little bit gross of a visual, but I literally wouldn't move my bowels for 5 to 7 days consistently. Like, this is not like I remember this happening once in a while. Like, I'm talking, I would move my bowels like once every 6 days. And I think the longest that I remember was up to almost about 10 days, like 9 to 10 days, where I'm literally just eating and drinking water and being a kid or trying to be, and nothing's coming out. Well, it's got to go somewhere, right? Like, what you bring in that you're not going to process and use as fat stores or towards muscle growth or development has to go somewhere, right? But I was blocked. Things weren't passing through, and it was all stuck inside of me for a really long time. And so I'd be terribly bloated because my intestines and my lower stomach region is just filling. I would be physically in a ton of pain, again, because there's a lot going on here. Physically, there's a lot of weight over here in my lower belly region that's just not passing through me. I can't sleep because I'm so high stressed and because I'm so nauseous. My stomach is swollen and distended because there's so much backed up and sitting there. And at this point in my life, in my childhood, 10, 11, 12 years old, the relationship that I had to my symptoms and to this experience was really just pure fear and terror and confusion. I was so scared that I didn't know what was happening with my body. I'd go tell my mom, Mommy, I don't feel good. She'd talk to my dad. They'd try to figure out what was going on with me. I didn't know what to do other than to just reach out to my parents for help. And at this point, I wasn't angry at my body. I wasn't mad at it for failing me. I was just really, really scared. I was a scared little girl. And one of the problems here is that as I'd go to my parents and try to ask them for help and for guidance, a lot of what I ended up receiving, which again is not their fault, I think I needed it just as much as I needed to get to the root. So I'm not saying this to bash them, but a lot of what I received was simply pain management. I'd take laxatives after every meal. I'd start overdosing my laxatives. As like a 10 or 11-year-old, I'm taking like 3 times the amount that's required. Doctor guided, doctor recommended, mind you. This is not just me being like, oh, I'm going to just take this to make myself feel better. I'm taking Zantac and anti-acid, anti-reflux medication over the counter. I'm getting things prescribed to me. And so most of this was really just pain management and doctor consultations at this point. And this is big problem number one. And big problem number one is that we had a one-way information transfer. You see, because I'm 10, 11, 12 years old, and I'm telling my parents and these doctors that they're bringing me to, I'm communicating my symptoms and how I feel and what's going on with me. And then my parents are talking to the doctors, but the doctors are never addressing me. They're never explaining to me, little girl, Ariana, this is what's going on with you. This is what we're trying to figure out. This is why you need to take these medications. And so it wasn't omni-channel. It wasn't communicated effectively. I was so totally in the dark about what was happening with my body. And I didn't realize that that was a problem at the time. I'm only knowing that now in hindsight, that that's a big problem because I put my bodily control in the hands of other people, And they never returned the favor. They never really received that information and came back to me and explained what they were doing next. And so I was just a black box. It was like I talk about what's going on. They send me to the doctor. I come home with medication. I don't really know what I'm taking or why. I'm just scared. And I don't know anything about what's happening inside my body or really what I'm taking for my body and how that's supposed to help me. I just didn't know anything. And the lesson that I learned here, unfortunately, is that the subject matter expert of my body is not me. It's my parents, it's the doctors, it's anybody who needs something from my body, like a blood sample or a urine sample or a stool sample. It's anybody but me. And my job, my role in this sort of story and narrative to try to feel better is to just provide whatever it is that they ask for. I don't have control over my body. That's not my role here. My role is just to provide from my body and pray that whatever I give to whomever is asking will help me, because I'm in so much pain and distress that I don't know any better than to just be desperate and act out of desperation in that way, and also trust my parents, who didn't do anything wrong, but I'm just saying this is the lesson that I learned from that. Now, as my symptoms exacerbate, I'm now having weekends where I'm so nauseous or cramped that I literally cannot get out of bed. I'm writhing in pain. I'm curled up in a ball on a Sunday morning when other kids are out playing. I don't want to move. A couple times they sent me to the hospital thinking that I was having appendicitis because I was in so much pain and cramping that it really did seem that way. And I'd show up to the hospital and I'd get put in the scrubs, or not the gown, and I'd get a CAT scan done, and I don't know what a CAT scan is because no one's explaining to me that. Like, I'm 11 years old. Drink this fluid because we need it to get you through the thing, and we need these IVs from you. And like, everyone's just plugging me to machines, and my job is to just sit there and not complain. I'm a flower on the wall to the experience, but it's my experience. It's my body that I'm struggling with, that I'm not feeling good in, that I'm not feeling safe in. And no one's really doing a good job of explaining to me what's going on or why, or what all of this stuff is supposedly doing for me or not doing for me, what blood work is being taken for and what it's showing. And so I don't know at all throughout this whole kind of, unfortunately, like really traumatic big block of my life, if I'm healthy or if I'm not healthy, or what things mean, or what that sample of blood went for, or what that urine sample went for. I'd go to the hospital and they'd just say, you're really backed up. Like, you gotta move your bowels. And I'm like, but what do I do with that information? I can't. I don't know what else to do. I had an endoscopy done at one point when I was in the 5th grade because they were trying to I still don't even know. Right now, I was about to just come up with an idea. I don't know what the purpose of having an endoscopy was. To fix or find a problem. Maybe they were looking for something that was happening in my esophageal lining or in here that could explain why things weren't moving, but I don't know. Still, to this day, I'm 25 years old, and I don't know why I had an endoscopy done. I remember, this is getting a little dark, I remember my mom telling me, we were driving to the mall one day, and she's like, yeah, maybe you have celiac disease. And I'm like, celiac disease? I have a disease? Disease? That's like cancer. That's bad. The word disease is scary when you're 12. The word disease is scary at any age, but especially at 12. And they're like, yeah, well, you don't process gluten. And at this point, I'm just hoping I have a disease because I'm in so much pain that I'm like, if I have something that they can diagnose, at least we can figure it out. And I'm broken, and let me be broken because then somebody can fix me. Not knowing what was going on and not getting any sort of sense that I was going to be able to be healed really made me create this narrative that something really bad was happening that nobody wanted to tell me about, that everybody was shielding me from. After a little while of, doctors and tests being run and all of this stuff kind of coming back as negative. No, you don't have that. No, you don't have that. Everything seems to be normal. She's just backed up. I think everybody had the intellectual perspective from the data that they could see, that it's just like, yeah, well, she's just backed up, but nobody knows what it feels like to be a 12-year-old when your body's shutting down and it's not working for you and you feel like your body is attacking you, and that's so scary, and everyone's sort of not taking you not seriously, but also at the same time, if nothing medically serious is going on, then it's just kind of hard to know what to say or to console. And my parents did not do a good job at that at all. My next lesson is that from a very early age, I learned that this region of me does not work, is not healthy, does not provide for me, is not a safe place for me, is actively fighting me, is actively hurting me, and wants to kill me because it's not working and it's causing me pain and it's making me feel weak and sick and unhealthy. And so I learned at a very early age in my life that this place in my body is a really bad place, and we don't like this area of my body. We got to do something about that. This area of my body is failing me and fighting me. Well, one thing you should know is that I'm a fighter too. And if I'm a fighter, I'm going to fight back. So if this area is hurting me, I'm going to hurt it. That's the lesson, unfortunately. Around age 13, my digestion starts to normalize. I recognize the abruptness of which I'm going from, I'm in the hospital to I'm healthy. That's really honestly how it felt. I just remember one day not really feeling like things were struggling anymore. My digestive system started to work. I started to move my bowels. I started to feel less nauseous. I didn't have acid reflux. I start to feel healthy. Things start to move. Nothing was ever diagnosed. To my knowledge, I don't actually have IBS. I don't actually have celiac disease. My endoscopy came back clear. My CAT scans were just like, you're not moving your bowels. That's the problem. I'm healthy. When I look back, what changed? What changed is my parents stopped fighting when I was 13 years old. They got very close to being divorced. They didn't end up getting divorced. They ended up just keeping on in a mostly civil term. Now, that's not to say that there was love or emotional nourishment that was suddenly coming into my life now, but we just stopped the cycle of yelling and screaming and fighting, and a lot of the really palpable visceral tension in my household went to pass. And then it basically just became like everyone's smiling and waving and everyone's sort of coexisting. And that happened non-coincidentally right around the same time that my digestive system started working. So take it as anecdotal. Don't take me seriously, but I think that the real culprit here, and I realized this years later in some slap of an aha that came to me, that I think my digestive system just shut down because I was so anxious that everything froze. Now I'm realizing that things unfroze when the stress came down, and the stress came down because my environment started to feel safe again. Thankfully, I started to feel better and healthy enough to feel like a normal kid. At 13 years old, I started to finally feel a little normal. These are the lessons that I'm leaving that first chunk, that decade of my life learning, okay? I am not the subject matter expert of my body. My health is in the hands of others. My tummy is not for me, but against me, actively against me. Toxins live there. They hurt me. They want to kill me because things aren't working in here, and that's making me feel really, really sick. Normal digestion feels like drinking water on a hot day to a normal person. Moving my bowels and just going to the bathroom, that's like a normal thing for most people. Well, to me, it feels literally like Jesus coming down from a heaven. I don't know. I'm not even religious, but that's how it feels. It feels like a religious experience to me because I was in so much pain over not being able to do that for so long that when I do it, I'm like, thank God. Like basically on the floor praying. Being bloated or full in my tummy region is not safe. If I physically just feel really distended or feel stuffed, I'm extraordinarily triggered, and I'm reminded of those times when I felt unwell. Visually, even if I physically feel okay, but I look distended, I look bloated, I'm not well because I started to learn to use the mirror to body check as a feedback for whether or not I was healthy, because the tests from the doctors are all coming back that I'm healthy, but I'm clearly not feeling well. And so I kind of just did what I could as a kid to try to manage my own experience in some way that I had control over. Another big one, take what you want from me. That's a lesson that I learned. Take my blood, take my urine samples, anesthetize me, put me under so you can shove a tube down my throat to do an endoscopy. I don't know what that is, but if you think it's going to help me, go for it, doc. I don't have to understand. I just have to say yes and okay. That was my role as a kid. I trust my parents are going to do the right things, and they did in many ways, but I didn't know what was happening to me. And so I learned that my role in this body is to just give. And it's to provide whatever somebody needs from me, whether it's my parents, whether it's my doctors, whether it's foreshadowing boys sexually. My role that I learned is I don't feel in control of my body. That's normal. That's been normalized to me. And my job is to just give to other people whatever it is that they're asking for. And another thing here that I don't really know how to loop it in, but it definitely ties into part 2, which is going to be my fitness journey and how I got really into lifting weights and working out. Thin tummies, muscular people who are shredded, who have six packs, who have abs, I really started to idolize that from a very young age. 9, 10, 11, I remember going to the bookstore as a family, and I'd run to the magazine section and I'd grab all the men's health magazines and I'd be like, I love that. And I wonder now, again, is that nature, is that nurture? Was I born just kind of thinking the male body is cool, muscular physiques are cool, or is it because I developed this kind of visual association with somebody who's really shredded and lean, and you can see their abs means that they don't have that much bad toxin in there because there's not a layer of fat or a layer of tissue that's hiding all of this bad stuff in there. They're thin, they're shredded, they're lean, they're vascular, they're healthy. That's the epitome of health. I don't know if that's nature, nurture, or learned behavior, but I started to learn that as well right around this age because of this experience. How are we doing? This is getting really long, but this is the story of my life. Okay, I literally needed to take a 20-minute break because that was so mentally and emotionally challenging and tiring that I couldn't finish the video. Again, wow, this is just... I hope this is helping whoever's listening to this. So now we get to 13. And my digestion has normalized at this point. I'm feeling relatively healthy, but I'm leaving, unfortunately, my early childhood years and that experience feeling like I'm not the subject matter expert of my body, feeling like there's this sense of learned helplessness with my body and my experience of being in it, that it's incomplete, it's impartial, it requires the assistance and the guidance and the touch of other people in order to be well and normal. And all of that kind of leads me to when I was sexually abused when I was 13. I was a month into 13, and I don't know how much of the details of that experience I want to get into in this video. If you're still listening and you want a separate video on sexual trauma, body trauma, sexual coercion, all of those kinds of things, I am more than happy to put that together, but this video is already getting really long and I don't think we need to talk about that right now. Long story short, I was sexually assaulted, and I left that evening wondering if there was a chance that I could be pregnant. In hindsight, that was not possible. It took me a little while to understand that that was not actually possible, but I latched onto that fear with everything that I had, and I felt so out of control over what had happened to me, and I didn't know if that was a possibility, and I had no one to speak to about it, and so I convinced myself that there was a chance that I could be pregnant. Because I didn't know how to navigate that situation in my life as a 13-year-old girl, I panicked, and I kept that to myself, and I took plan B, and I didn't know how to know if that worked or not. And so essentially the next 10 months of my life became a matter of attacking my body. I went through that period in a serious level of panic and terror and fear, over my stomach, the size of my stomach, the feelings going on in my stomach. I became an incessant body checker. How bloated am I today? I'd look in the shower and I'd see how far my stomach extended out. I'd check myself in the mirror at least 50, 60, maybe 70 times a day. Every time I walked past the mirror, I would just stand there and stare at myself. And the difference between going through this period of my life and the digestive issues of my life is that back then I was a little bit younger and I didn't feel like I was in control or responsible at all. I just was really scared at that point in my life about my symptoms and what I was feeling. The difference here, unfortunately, is that I was just really scared and all that, but I was really angry at myself. I was angry at my body. I tried to avoid a potential outcome by doing unconscionable things. I viewed Plan B as a medication that could kind of just become an incessant body checker. I vilified my body if I was bloated on a certain day. If I felt extra bloated, I would go on these really long fasts. I did whatever I could in my control to reduce or limit my body just because I felt like it was maybe already going to fail me again because it had failed me my whole life in different ways, but I had kind of already, created that narrative. I just became an incessant body checker in this era. I was very mindful of what I ate, how much I ate. I'd go on these long fasts. I'd feel better. I'd feel like I was in control of something. Maybe I'm stopping something from being able to grow if I don't eat. Really horrible stuff. And it's hard really for me to sit here and say that, but that's what was happening in my brain as a 13-year-old girl who had experienced so much trauma within her body. And this is really when food manipulation first started to begin with me. This is the first experience in my life, moments in my life where I started to consciously try to manipulate my experience of the things that I allowed into my body, because I saw that there was a link between what I let in and what came out and what was potentially going to be able to happen with my body. And so it was the first time I felt like I was in control of something, and I latched onto that because I never had that feeling before. So eventually my 10 months subside and I realized there is literally no way that I could be pregnant because I would have figured it out by then. The last couple things that I'm gonna add in here in this video right now quickly is that I fainted when I was, I think, 13. There was a little bit of overlap over when I was sexually assaulted and kind of navigating that period of my life, and fainted really as a result of not having eaten enough and I was volunteering at a vet clinic and I was watching them perform a spay, and I got skeeved out and I passed out. Again, normal thing, but I became really obsessive about food and I hadn't eaten enough that morning. So I became really mindful of that. And so I started to develop these food fears and timing around, I don't want to go to school without eating, and I'm not going to go more than 2 hours without eating. And if I'm anxious, then I'm really nervous because what if I get anxious and then I pass out again, because that felt really out of control for my body and didn't want to feel that way. And so a lot of that food manipulation, counting, tracking, timing of eating, being really mindful to an unhealthy degree of what I'm eating and why and how it's making me feel really started. And that honestly persisted for 5 to 6 years of my life. I really only started to kind of lighten that up or feel free of that when I was 19. And I started bodybuilding, and that's a different video. That's going to be part 2. And the other thing that I'm going to just kind of briefly trickle in here is that while I was only technically sexually assaulted once in my life, I have experienced a lot of other bodily violence, people who mistreated my body in a sexual setting. I felt victim to the people-pleasing, sexual coercion, negotiating pleasure. And all of that I think really stemmed from growing up and feeling like I was not in control of my body. I put my bodily health and safety and the future of myself and my experience in the hands of other people, my parents, doctors, people to kind of guide me. And that learned helplessness infected and sort of seeded its way into a lot of different circumstances where I can't tell you that I experienced that violence because somebody was necessarily doing something supremely unconscionable or immoral. but I walked into situations that I wasn't meant to be in because I didn't know what else to do. I basically just trusted people to navigate my body safely and effectively for me. And that didn't work out so well for me. It led to a lot more pain in my life, unfortunately. I don't want to say this is like an abridged ending to this video, but like I said, it's part one. This is all of the things that I remember having a material impact on my relationship to my body, my early triggers of experiences that led me to an issue with control over food manipulation, body checking, dysmorphic bodily perception, controlling my diet, my nutrition, my exercise to try to kind of balance my well-being. And a lot of these things that are really the roots of the disordered eating habits that I started to kind of lean into as hooks to make myself feel better in an unhealthy and maladaptive way over the course of my life. And you need to know all of this in order to have the context for the next part and the part after that and the symptoms and what I started to kind of do. And so, yeah, I'm sorry if this is not ending in a super encouraging way, but I promise there will be a part two. I don't think it'll be next week because A, I'm in Miami and I'm probably just going to throw a quick short up on my channel. But B, this is really emotionally hard and they take time, and so I might need a few weeks before I dive into part two. You're not alone. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are going to fall into this video some way or another, whether you follow me or you don't. And maybe you'll have had an experience where you were sexually assaulted, or you had body issues when you were a kid, or you had health conditions that led to this. And hopefully by me detailing out some of these more, detailed experiences of my story, very personal to me, that are really just serving as context for a broader story that I'm going to continue to tell. But maybe you share some of that and this makes you feel or helps you feel a little bit less alone in the experience that I had, which is that, my body feels like an encyclopedia of terms and conditions that were accepted on my behalf that I've now needed to learn what they mean. I acquired these, I didn't create them. It feels like my body sort of adopted me and I'm learning it, as opposed to feeling like we're together. And my earliest memories are of not understanding myself or feeling in control of my body, like I had no autonomy over it and like I'm incomplete and needed other people to satisfy my body or to fix my body for me, alongside me. And all of that is really bad stuff that led to a lot of bad things, and we're working through them. We are working through them. We're healing. We're growing. We went to therapy. We're figuring it all out, but I just want you to know you're not alone. And knowing that somebody's going to watch this video, even one person, and they're going to feel like, oh my God, I had no idea somebody could say all of this, and there was somebody else out there who's struggling like I am, makes this so worth it for me. Definitely not easy, but so worth it. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. I think this video is going to be like almost an hour long, even if I edit it down. And if you've been here for the full thing, I appreciate you beyond belief and imagination. And if you ever need somebody to talk to, I'm here. Just leave a comment down below. And I'm sending you a hug through the internet. With that being said, I love you. Thank you so much for being here. And I'll talk to all of you next week. Bye.